All right,
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to the June Ask Tom Database Security Office Hours. I'm your host. My name is Richard Evans, and I'm a product manager of Oracle Database Security. I'm joined by friends and colleagues, Alan and Alex. Alan is a product manager of Oracle Database Security, focusing on authentication, label security, real application security, just about everything that we can give Alan, we give to Alan. Okay? And Alex is a senior principal product manager as well, focusing on .NET, Microsoft tools, and this super cool integration that we're talking about today. Alex's team, Alan's team, and Microsoft have collaborated on. Okay. This call is being recorded. The recording will be available next week or so on the Ask Tom platform. This is a shortcut link for you, bit.ly/asktomdbsec. We've got 5 years worth of recordings out there. Just about anything database security related, you can find a video for it out there. If we've missed something, let us know. We'd love to do a video on it. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. This is your monthly database security office hours with the database security development team. We hold this on the second Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. US Central, regardless of time zone change or time change, fallback, spring forward. We have announcements, we have a technical topic, and then we have Q&A. So you're welcome to ask any questions you want, regardless of whether they're related to this session or not. We may have to take some of those offline, but we're happy to continue the discussion after today's event. We'll get into some announcements here. I always try to put the links that we're talking about today on this GitHub repository. That way you have a cheat sheet for them, and I'll drop them in the chat right now, this link here. But we've got over, I think, 2 years worth of these notes out there. It should make it a little bit easier. So hopefully you're not scrambling to say, oh, wait, what was that Moss note? Or what document was he referring to? Or where should I look? I try to put everything out here on this GitHub repository for you to use as a reference later, okay? We talk about patching every month. The next patch will be released on or around the 16th of July. Please, please, please stay on top of your database patching, your client patching, your application patching, your OS, your network, all of your patching as much as possible. Once patches are released, that's when we start to see malicious users or curious users reverse engineering those CVEs that we fixed. So if you're not staying on top of that, that's when you start to see, oh, hey, I know how to exploit that, and people take advantage of those vulnerabilities or those bugs at that point. So a couple of my Oracle support notes listed on the screen, as well as in the GitHub page. Check out oracle.com/security-alerts for information on patching, bulletins, alerts, things like that. If you are using real application clusters, RAC, check out Fleet Patching and Provisioning. It may help you make your patching a little bit easier with gold images of the grid infrastructure and the database. And as always, Mike Dietrich is the fountain of knowledge when it comes to everything patching and upgraded related. So check out MikeDietrichDE.com for anything on Oracle database patching or upgrades. For today's conversation, there's some documentation that we want you to be familiar with. So check out the 23 AI and the 19C security guides. Chapter 7 talks about IAM integration. Chapter 8 is what we're focusing on today, where it talks about authenticating and authorizing Microsoft Azure Active Directory users for Oracle Database. Great chapter, should get you started on this integration if that's what you're looking to do. Alex has a website here, Connect Microsoft Tools to Oracle Databases. So that link there is also available in the GitHub repository, so you can check that out. And then Alan and I did a video on this Azure Active Directory integration about a year ago. I think it was last fall that we did it. So check out that video as well as kind of a primer for this. And then Alan has a YouTube playlist as well for Azure AD OAuth 2 tokens for Oracle Database. So you can read about it, and then you can watch the Ask Tom video, and you can watch Alan's videos to kind of understand what we're doing and then how you could implement this in your environment. Database Security Live Labs are always a good way to get your hands on database security, as well as just about everything else Oracle database related. We've got over 40 security-related labs out there. Most of them, more than half of them, you can run on Oracle's dime. So you can spin it up, play with TDE for encryption, play with TLS, one-way TLS. You can play with Key Vault, Audit Vault, Database Vault, Data Safe, like just about every product out there. And then I think you should be able to spin up a like a VM, and then if you've got your own environment where you're doing Azure Active Directory, you could play with this kind of a configuration, maybe with an ADB free instance as well. So we don't have a live lab yet for this. We'd love to work on one, but you should be able to follow Alex and Alan's instructions and kind of build it in your environment too. Oracle CloudWorld registration is open. So if you'd like to join us at Oracle CloudWorld this year in Las Vegas from September 9th through 12th, you can register at that QR code there on the screen. You can go to oracle.com/CloudWorld as well. It's going to be exciting. Lots of security related presentations, database presentations, lots of good stuff, lots of good opportunity to interact with us as product managers at these events. Okay, so hope to see you there. All right, let's get over to the main presentation today. Alan, I'll stop sharing and let you take over, sir.
Thank you all very much for joining. This is a very exciting new feature, new development for us. So exciting that we've got two product managers here to present this particular feature. Alex Keh from the .NET and Microsoft Tools side of the house, and myself from the database security side. We worked together with Microsoft for the last few years to get this in place. So it's been very exciting for us, and work the close collaboration we've had with Microsoft on this. So I'll just briefly talk about how it works, configuring the Oracle database. Actually, this is a very simple aspect. Normally, configuring the database is more difficult, but this is very simple. I have a short demo of that. Then I'll turn it over to Alex to configure the Power BI. He'll show actually how to do both the desktop and the service, along with demonstrations for that. So this started in 2021. We had some large customers ask about this SSO integration to be able to use the Azure, their Azure SSO to connect from Power BI to the Oracle database. So Oracle jumped on this. We had a crash project, and we did an full integration with the OAuth 2 token from Azure AD for a number of flows, both for humans and application integration. This is now called MS Entra ID, as we discussed. Then we continued to work with Microsoft, and they got the Power BI Desktop SSO last year, and this year they completed the Service and Gateway SSO integration, which just released. And this is a very simple chart, but you have the Power BI user would authenticate with Microsoft Entra ID to access Power BI. When they decide to connect with the Oracle database, Power BI would get a token from Entra ID, and then that token is then passed to the database. This is primarily an identity token, has all the information for accessing the database. All the information is in there. So the Oracle database just needs to confirm that the token came from Microsoft Entra ID. We do that with the public key from MSCI. And this works with any Oracle database, not just the autonomous, which we'll show a demo with, but with your on-premises databases, as well as databases in clouds, because this is an intrinsic database functionality. It's not related to any particular cloud or cloud control plane. So there's two integrations. I sort of mentioned it slightly with that in the last discussion there. We have the quick Power BI only configuration. This allows Power BI users to connect using their Azure SSOs to the database. Now, this doesn't allow other users that are not using Power BI to use their Azure SSO. It's only for Power BI users. So you're not going to be able to use SQL Plus to access this if you just configure it in this fashion. But it is quick, right? You just enable a database. You map the individual users, the Power BI users, separate schemas, grant privileges and roles with schemas. And this is the cool thing, that access token, that identity token, is not the Power BI identity, it's the user identity. So the authorization in the database is managed and controlled within the database. It's not, they don't get to see everything. It's just what they're allowed to see. And the neat thing with this configuration is there's no separate app registrations with MSCI. This can be done completely by the DBA. in the database, all right, and the Power BI side. Conversely, you also have the full MS Entra ID configuration. This allows the Power BI users to still connect using their Azure SSO, but also allows DBAs and others to connect to the database using their Azure SSO. This, you got interactive flow, and some clients will support the device code flow. You got client credential flow, and some will also have support the managed identity flow. So a number of different ways to use these OAuth 2 tokens to connect to the database. But this is a little bit more involved. You got to work with the MSCI admin. They do the app registration for the database, set up app roles, and then you also need a public app registration for the DBA clients. This still you don't need an app registration for the Power BI clients, just for folks that are using the full OAuth 2 capability. Then MSCI, the admin assigns the users and groups to database app roles. You enable the database. You map the users, like Power BI users still get mapped to schemas, and then you map app roles to schemas for shared schemas, so you can manage like DBAs and other users using group app roles. And then you grant privileges and roles to schemas in the global roles. So a little bit more complex, but you get a lot more capability out of it. So you have two options here. What we're going to focus on today is a Power BI configuration, because that's what we just released. So for on-prem, for non-autonomous database, right? So it's on-prem and other DBaaS instances like XSCC and XSCS. You have two alter system parameters you set. You set the identity provider type to Azure AD. This is obviously before they changed the name to MSCI. And then you alter system set some parameters. This is normally used for metadata from the full configuration, but we still need to set it, but you can just put dummy variables in here, because there is no application ID URI when you're just doing this quick configuration. It doesn't have to be these numbers, it could be anything in here. Then you got to map the Power BI users, such as Peter Fitch is a user, and you map them and you create a user or schema, PBI user 1, and it's identified globally. And then you need to grant privileges and set roles to that user. And that's it. Now for this demo, I'm using ADB-Serverless. And so what they do is they simplified it. They instead of two alter system commands, they just have a DBMS Cloud Admin procedure. And but you have the same information in there. You see the Azure AD for the type and the JSON object for these parameters. Again, there's still dummy values, so you can just put dummy values in here. All right, that's it. We'll just jump into the demo. I've already logged in, and we'll take a look at that first, the parameter from $, parameter identity provider type, and here it says none. So we're going to go ahead and configure the database or enable the database for MSCI external directory integration. We'll take a look at the $, parameter again. And now it says Azure AD. So we finished the first part. Now we have to do the creating the user and create user PBI user 1, identify globally, exact same thing I already discussed. And then you do have to grant privileges and roles. And let's take a look at the DBA users. I'll query for authentication type equals global, and it shows us the PBI user 1 was created, and this is the external name. This is the mapping that the database uses. All right, and so that's it. This is all configured. Now, it's PBI, Power BI has to do the configuration. If you're interested in the full Microsoft Entra ID integration, that's what Rich mentioned, the previous Ask Tom I did on this. That is for the full Microsoft Entra ID integration. And we have the YouTube playlist with short sections of that. We got some blogs and Azure AD documentation. So this all exists. So you can look at the prior one if you're looking for the full Entra ID integration. Now I'll turn it over to Alex.
Thank you, Alan. Let me share my screen and make sure I got the right screen here. There we go. Okay. So, so Alan took you through the the database side and how to configure the database users so that they'll be able to log in through Azure AD. And this applies to Power BI. We've tested it with Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service. Very importantly, for Power BI Service, you will need at least the April version or the late April version of the on-premises data gateway. And that is, well, I'll go through what the gateway is doing, but the functionality that Microsoft has added for Azure AD, Power BI Service, going through the gateway requires at least the April version or higher. So Rich's recommendation to do the patching is very well taken. Make sure you got an updated version of the data gateway that was something in the last month or so. And then on top of that, Power BI Service is kind of always updated because it's a SaaS service, so Microsoft's always updating. So you don't have to worry about that actual service there. So let's talk about the configuration. First thing you'll want to do is you'll need to install an Oracle data provider in order to do the data access to the Oracle database. And Microsoft has chosen kind of the same data provider to use for Power BI Service, Power BI Desktop, as well as basically their entire suite of data tools. So to make it easier for you as not only as an administrator or an end user or a developer to be able to start using this data provider, we have a bespoke install just for Microsoft tools. They have a specific set of configurations that need to be set up. You can obviously do this with OUI or an Xcopy installation, and then apply the individual custom, not custom, but configuration that are specific to Microsoft tools. But it's much easier if we just give you a GUI installer that kind of does it for you and just have to answer 3 basic questions. So whether you are very technical or not, it's much faster, much easier, much simpler. It's an MSI-based install so that you can also set it up so that it can be automated, and you can script it so that you can deploy it to hundreds of different clients as well in a standardized way. We just wanted to make it easy as possible to get yourself going with connecting Oracle databases with Microsoft tools. So that's why we have it there. And specifically, what's installing on your computer is Oracle Data Provider for .NET. That's Oracle's .NET Data Provider for ADO.NET. And it will auto-configure that for you. So we have 2 flavors of the provider, managed and unmanaged. The version that's going to be used will depend on what the Microsoft tool has chosen to use. Unmanaged ODP.NET is the one used by Power BI Service and Power BI Desktop. Microsoft is currently migrating that over to managed ODP.NET. Managed ODP.NET has some advantages over it being a smaller install, it being also supporting both 32-bit and 64-bit in the same DLL, and also doesn't have to use an Oracle client. That's why it's smaller. It doesn't have to use an Oracle client, so that it becomes a little much simpler to manage because you don't have the challenge of multiple Oracle homes on the machine as well. So managed ODP.NET is the way of the future, but right now it's unmanaged ODP.NET, and I'll talk about how to use it right now with unmanaged ODP.NET. And the movement to manage will be generally seamless. So you'll use the same installer because it installs both. So you won't have any trouble into the future anyway. You just get both installed, and it'll configure both ODP.NET versions for you as you use it, no matter what tool you're using with Microsoft. And of course, as Alan said, it connects to any Oracle database, including Oracle Autonomous Database. So what does OCMT support? So Power BI Desktop, Power BI Service is what we're talking about. But basically any Microsoft data tool that can get data from an Oracle database. So that includes their ETL tool, SQL Server Integration Services, SQL Server Analysis Services, SQL Server Data Tools, Reporting Services, as well as Excel and BizTalk Server. The ones that say SQL Server, except for maybe Reporting Services, they generally use the managed ODP.NET. And I expect over time, most of these other guys will move over to managed ODP.NET. A Power BI Desktop, Power BI Service will definitely be first to make that movement. Well, I should say will be next to make that movement over. And Rich shared the link with you. This is where you can go download Oracle Client for Microsoft Tools, as well as get tutorials for the first 6 of these tools for how to set things up, and also a tutorial for going through Oracle Client for Microsoft Tools doing the installation as well. So when you get the Oracle client for Microsoft Tools, what you'll see is just three basic choices you need to make to do the installation. It's GUI, so it'll be a pretty simple interface for anyone to use, whether they're technical or not. First, you choose where you want to install unmanaged ODP.NET. The default will install both unmanaged and managed, so you can just take the defaults and click next if you want, but you choose the location where you want to install it. And this will work for Power BI Desktop and Data Gateway. The one caution I would have for, actually, this won't be a problem where you install it. Yeah, you can take the default for this. This is the next one that I will say a caution. So you choose the install, you choose which provider, you choose the install location, and then you choose where to ODP.NET can find its config files. So in this case, it's your TNS names and SQLnet.aura. That's where you can, basically, we're going to set your TNS underscore admin, since you guys are a fairly Oracle savvy crowd. You know what TNS admin is. But for those who don't, this is Oracle's configuration for our net service name definitions, and any type of Oracle client configuration with the networking are defined in these two files. You just have to point to where it is. By default, we're going to pick a C:\user space, although I think we're going to change that in the next version of our installation. And the advantage of that is that, as the user, that's your space. So other people, it's kind of a secure space to store it. The downside of that is that with the Power BI Gateway, is that it's running as a Windows service, not as a user service. And as a Windows service, it doesn't have access to user directories. So that's kind of a user area of the directory that they don't want to give access to by generic Windows services. So you might, if you're using with Power BI Gateway, you're going to have to choose another directory besides C:\users. That's not a protected directory. And then you just run the install. That's it. So those three basic choices you just need to make, which should be pretty simple for most people. A few more things about the OCMT configuration. It comes in two flavors, 64-bit and 32-bit. And it matters just for unmanaged ODP.NET, because unmanaged ODP.NET is bit aware, I should say. And if you have 32-bit Power BI Desktop, you'll need to use 32-bit OCMT. And of course, 64-bit OCMT goes with 64-bit Power BI. If you're using Power BI Service and the gateway, it's always 64-bit, so just go 64-bit there. That OCMT also applies for Excel as well. So if you're using 32-bit Excel, 30-bit OCMT, 64-bit Excel, 64-bit OCMT. If you're using wallets, which a lot of autonomous database users are doing, there's a few things you could do. If it's a single if it's a single set of databases or a single wallet that you are going to connect to, you can just change the wallet location in the directory setting of your SQLnet.aura. So this is a good place to change it and to set the directory where to find your wallet if you have just one wallet and one database, or that wallet's used by the same set of databases, because SQLnet.aura applies to all the connections that you have. Now, if you have multiple databases and they each have their own wallet, you can use the TNS names.aura to set the wallet underscore location, so that each net service name will have its own wallet to refer to, rather than the generic one that I'll refer to as SQLnet.aura. So that's kind of a tip for you if you have multiple wallets there. And lastly, I often get asked, can I use just anything else besides net service names? And you can. Net service name is definitely the most common, but you can also use the entire Connect descriptor. You can use Easy Connect or Easy Connect Plus. And this applies to both Power BI Service and Power BI Desktop. Now, one thing about Power BI Desktop is that in the data source entry window or text box, it's limited to 128 characters. And sometimes Connect descriptors and Easy Connect Plus can go beyond 128 characters. So if you have that, you'll have to probably defer back to net service name to do that. That's just one tip to be aware of. And the general process of connecting with Microsoft Entra ID and Power BI Desktop, we'll do a demo of that first, is when you try to log in, you'll be presented with three options. One of them is the Microsoft account option. And then you just click the sign on button on that, and a new Entra ID window will appear, and you enter in your SSO credentials, and that should be it. So let's take a look at that. Let me bring that up here. So this is Power BI Desktop. And if I want to connect to an Oracle database, I go to click Get Data up here on the top. You can have a list of data sources. We're going to choose the Oracle database here. And this is the same process whether you're doing on-prem or cloud. I have an existing TNS names.aura, and one of the data sources is called ADB. So my net service name is ADB. So if I just say OK, it should be able to use the odp.net client and find that TNS names.aura and find that ADB equates to this longer connect descriptor. We see the traditional Windows OS authentication and database username password authentication. And this is something that Microsoft introduced last year for Oracle connections, is the Microsoft account. And this is the one you use Microsoft Entra ID to connect with. So right now I'm not signed in, so let's sign in. You see a window appears. You can add a new account. I'm going to use my existing account. This is the one that I have. Alan has set up for me in the in his database. And you can see that I am currently signed in. So I've authenticated into Microsoft Entra ID. It recognizes who I am, and then I can connect to my Oracle database. Now it's going to initiate that connection and then pull down the list of schemas that my user is allowed to see. So you can see the schemas. I've got my Alex schema, although I don't really have anything in that one. But sales history is something most of you should be familiar with. It's a common Oracle sample schema. So we've got various things like channels, costs, customers. So we can click the specific tables that we want to load and then load them. We can transform them. But basically, this is it. Power BI Desktop has been able to access the Oracle database. In this case, I'm using an Oracle Autonomous database. If you didn't get the reference with the ADB net service name, and you can see it's brought down some of the data so I can preview it, and it's been truncated because they don't want to. I think it's thousands of customers or something like that in the sample schema, so they don't want to do all that. And then you just load it, and that's it. It'll just bring it down to your Power BI app, and you can start building a data visualization application using this data. So that's Power BI Desktop. Let's talk about Power BI Service. So back to the show. So just some background about Power BI Service with Oracle Database, so that if you're not that familiar with how the architecture works, just the deployment model, it helps you understand what's going on. You've got your browser. It's a browser-based app. It's a SaaS app. So you've got a browser, which is the ultimate in thin clients. And then you've got the Power BI service, which is kind of your app server, running the reports and other data visualization that Power BI does, delivering it to the end user. And then for data access, you've got odp.net, as I discussed before. Now, this is a SaaS service, and SaaS services typically don't let you install, or I should say, should never let you install software on top of it, just because it's a service. You're not supposed to be able to modify it like platform as a service, kind of by definition. So because of that, you're running odp.net outside of the SaaS service in what we call the Power BI Gateway, or on-premises data gateway. And this can be just a machine running Windows, and it could be an infrastructure machine, or it can be something on-prem that you're running. And then you've got your Oracle Cloud here for Oracle Autonomous Database, but it can be an on-premises database as well. You could put these two together if they're both running on Windows, but since Power BI Gateway only runs on Windows, and usually you're running this on probably some Linux box or Unix box, well, you can run on Windows if you want to. They're usually separate tiers. So what usually happens, the end user makes a request for some data. Power BI Service says, okay, I got to pull this from the database, talks to odp.net, then which pulls data from the Oracle database. Oracle database delivers to odp.net, delivers to Power BI Service, and delivers the data to the customer. So that's kind of the general deployment configuration and how things are set up. Now, to set up Power BI Service with Microsoft Entra ID, just the things you'll need to be aware of as you go through this what's different from what you've done before with just general username, password logins with Oracle to Power BI Service. Things that to be aware of is that you have to enable Entra ID SSO for data gateway for your tenancy. So by default, Microsoft has shut off this Entra ID SSO for all databases. So they kind of see this as we don't want to enable by default if customers aren't intending to use it, so we'll leave it off. So you have to have your tenant administrator, or if you have tenant administration privileges, you have to enable it for your tenancy, and then anyone can use it. And then after that, your end users can then create the connections, or your developers, or whoever's the one setting the connections up. As you configure your connection, you want to use on-premises, even if you're using cloud, because that's just the just the way that Microsoft has set it up. It's a on-premises radio button that you select. You choose OAuth 2.0, since these are OAuth 2.0 tokens, and then you enter in your SSO credentials, just as you saw with Power BI Desktop. I did. The same kind of window will appear, and then you enter in your credentials, and then you will check the box, use SSO via Azure AD for direct queries box, and then you just connect. So let's take a look at this demonstration, and let me find my browser window. There it is. Missed it. There we go. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So first thing, let's make sure we're configured for tenancy to be able, as a tenant administrator, to be able to make this modification so that we can use Entra ID SSO. So you'll see that here, these are my assigned roles. I'm a Fabric administrator and an application administrator. So I have the privilege to be able to modify the tenancy administration across privileges. So all the users in my tenancy will have this ability to use Entra ID SSO. So now that I know that I have that role so that I can enable the privilege, we can go set up that privilege to make sure it's set up. I've already set it up, but we'll go there and make sure that it's correct. So you want to go to your admin portal and tenant settings. And this is something that Alan and I have in a blog, so you don't have to try to memorize this, and it's recorded too, so maybe you can just review this video, which is fine. And then we are going to filter by Entra, and we're going to look for this, because there's a lot of settings, so you probably want to do the filtering on Microsoft Entra single sign-on for data gateway. So this is what you need, and you can see I've already enabled it for the entire organization here, but by default, it'll be disabled. And you want to move that radio button over, or the slider over, and then you want to hit apply. It takes a few seconds or maybe a minute to apply. It doesn't do it instantly, so I'm not going to re-enable it now just because I'm going to do my demo next and I want it to succeed. So but rest assured, I've already enabled it, so I don't need to set it. But this is something you'll need to do on your own if you haven't done it already. And then so now that we have it enabled, let's go and go to the manage connections and gateways. So this will allow me to set up my connection to my autonomous database. So we'll create a new connection. Remember I said use the on-premise radio button. So here it is. We'll select that. And the gateway is called My Gateway, which I showed you before. So I have it up and running on my current machine. And then this one is, we'll call this my connection. You can give it any string you want. It's just a name that you'll use. It'll show up on this list here. So it can be any name you want. Its connection type is going to be Oracle because we're connecting to an Oracle database. And this is where you put in your net service name or your entire connection string. So you could put in your connect descriptor as well. So we have ADB as our net service name, so I'm putting that in there. The authentication method will be OAuth 2. And then this is where we enter in our credentials. So we're going to pick my account again. And since I've already logged in on this machine, it remembers that, oh, okay, Alex, you've logged in already. And so we can see that edit credentials is kind of like in green now because it's successfully connected. We choose this selection using SSO via Azure AD for direct queries. And then we just hit create. And it will go ahead and create that entry in this manage connections and gateways area. Close this guy here. And we can see it's right here. And we can see if we have connectivity to my gateway. So I'm going to load that and it's online. So that's good. That's a good sign. So if we go back to my workspace, let's get connected to the Oracle database from Power BI service. So we'll create a new data. Let's create a data flow. Data flow uses Power Query so that you can extract data from the Oracle database, transform it, anything like that, and then put it in Power BI. So you can see Power Query is running here. Now that we're created a data flow, let's get some data. We're going to choose an Oracle database. So let's go to choosing more, and we'll find the Oracle database here. Okay, so now that we're in here, we're going to type the net service name again, and we'll see what entries equate to that net service name. So I have 3 entries here, and we created the mycon. So we'll use mycon as the connection. And because we've already set it up, there's really nothing to do besides just click next, and it'll connect to the data source. You can see it's trying to connect here. And we'll see, just like in Power BI Desktop, a list of schema objects that my user is allowed to view. And we can see that. We can choose the data we want to use in Power BI service. Here, we'll go back to sales history, and you can choose the same set of tables that we saw before, and it'll do kind of a similar operation, which is allow you to preview the data. So that's basically it. Here we go. It's pretty simple. We've tried to make it as simple as possible through the Oracle client from Microsoft Tools. So kind of to wrap up, there's one performance tuning tip with Power BI that you can do. Power BI is a desktop app, and it is a SaaS app. So and ODP.NET itself is just a generic .NET API, and it's very powerful in terms of the different ways you can performance tune it. But because of being a SaaS app or a desktop app that's not intended for hardcore developers to use to do tuning, there's limited options how to tune, but there is a way to tune. Specifically, when you're querying large data sets, you've got maybe hundreds of megabytes you want to retrieve, and one common way to improve the retrieval time is to reduce the number of database round trips. And normally you would do that through code and determining fetch size, but you have to set this in your configuration. So it's specifically in the registry. And to do that, you turn on that on your on-premise data gateway or your Power BI desktop machine. You use regedit.exe. This does require Windows admin privileges. You go to your registry key, HKLM, software, Oracle, ODP.NET. In this case, we're using 19C of version of OCMT. So it's this version of OCMT with the 19.1 at the end. In the future, when we do have a 23 version, it'll end with 23.1. And then you add a string value there called fetch size. No space, just fetch size. And we set the number of bytes to fetch per round trip. By default, it's set to 128K. So this 131,072 number. But you can set it to any size you want. If you want it to be very large, something like 4 megabytes, you can set it there. It doesn't have to be exactly 4 megabytes. You can just say 4 million if you want. That works too. I mean, it's basically just how much data, how many bytes you want to retrieve per round trip, and that should speed things up if you got large data sets. The downside is that it will set aside 4 megabytes of memory, even if you're only fetching 1K of data. But if memory is fairly cheap for your desktop or your middle tier machine compared to what you want in the speed of performance, then that's a fair trade-off to make. And then once you make this change, be sure to restart. Very important to restart the data gateway or the Power BI desktop for those settings to come into effect. If you make the change and don't restart, you're going to be using the old fetch size. So that's it for my part of the presentation. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Back to you, Rich.
Thanks, Alex. Do a little more housekeeping here. Again, these notes and links are available on our GitHub repository. And next month, we've already got our topics picked out. So please join us next month on Wednesday, July 10th. We're going to have Russ on to talk about continuing education for DBAs and security professionals. And we're going to have Naja on to talk about what's new in AVDF, the latest release update, as well as best practices for upgrading your Oracle Audit Vault and Database Firewall environment. Okay.